It was still dark when the first sound reached his ears, not the familiar shuffle of his own horses, but something heavier, more hesitant. The rancher, Ethan, rubbed his eyes, thinking it was just the wind or a raccoon sneaking into the barn again. But then he heard it, a low, anxious neigh. One that didn't belong to any of his animals. He grabbed his lantern and stepped into the freezing dawn. The air was thick with fog, the kind that made every shape look like a ghost. His boots crunched the frosted dirt as he pushed the barn door open, and there it was. A magnificent, dark chestnut horse stood in the corner stall. Its coat was slick with dew, its eyes wide, wild, and scared. Ethan froze. He didn't recognize the horse. And the gate had been latched from the outside. "Easy there, girl," he whispered, raising his hand slowly. But as he took a cautious step closer, something caught his eye, a folded piece of paper taped to the wooden stall door. The edges fluttered in the cold draft. The note. He pulled it off gently, his heart pounding louder than the storm clouds rolling in the distance. The handwriting was shaky, the ink slightly smudged, but the words were clear: "Please take care of her. She's all I have left." Ethan felt the weight of those words sink deep. Who would leave a horse like this, a purebred, clearly well-trained, with shoes polished just days ago, and vanish into the night? He looked around for tracks, but the fog had already swallowed every trace. Something in the horse's eyes kept him from turning away. They weren't just frightened, they were grieving. He could tell. It wasn't just an animal left behind, it was a story, a secret, maybe even a final goodbye. He fed her, gently brushed her mane, and whispered, "Don't worry. You're safe now." But the note in his hand burned like fire. Who was behind it? And what had driven them to leave such a creature behind? He didn't know it yet, but that single note was about to unravel a story that would change everything he believed about loyalty, loss, and second chances. Ethan couldn't shake it from his mind all morning. That sentence, "She's all I have left." It echoed like a ghost in his head while he fixed fences, poured feed, and tried to pretend life was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. Every few minutes, he found himself drifting back to the barn, as if drawn by something invisible. The strange mare stood quietly now, her deep brown eyes following him wherever he moved. She wasn't aggressive, but she wasn't relaxed either, it was as if she was waiting for someone who would never come back. When the sun finally broke through the fog, Ethan noticed something else, a thin leather strap tied around her neck, just under the mane. Hanging from it was a small silver locket. His breath caught. He unhooked it carefully and flipped it open. Inside was a tiny, faded photo of a woman holding the same horse as a foal, smiling as if the world still made sense back then. And beneath that photo, carved into the metal, was a single word: faith. He whispered it aloud. "Faith, is that your name, girl?" The mare raised her head slightly, as if she understood. That sealed it for him. Whoever had left her behind hadn't done so out of neglect, they were desperate. Maybe in danger. Maybe heartbroken. Maybe both. He decided to call the sheriff, but halfway through dialing, something stopped him. He remembered how the note was written, not in panic, but with care. Whoever left her didn't want the authorities involved. They wanted her safe, not found. By afternoon, Ethan saddled one of his own horses and rode the trail behind the property, hoping to find tracks, a clue, anything. But the ground was frozen solid. All he found was a single red ribbon tangled on a fence post, the kind you'd tie in a horse's mane before a show or before saying goodbye. That night, he returned to the barn again. Faith was standing under the lantern's glow, her eyes soft now, calm. Ethan sat beside her stall and read the note one more time. "Please take care of her. She's all I have left." He whispered into the quiet, "Who are you?" But deep down, he already knew this wasn't just about finding an owner. This was about uncovering a story someone had tried to bury, one that would pull him into a past full of heartbreak, promises, and a truth he wasn't ready to face. By the third morning, Ethan had already accepted that Faith wasn't just a visitor, she was now part of his world. He cleaned her stall, brushed her coat until it shone, and started talking to her like she could actually answer. Maybe, in a way, she did. With her calm breathing, the way she nudged his arm gently whenever he paused, the way her eyes followed him with something that felt like gratitude. But even as the bond grew, one question refused to leave his mind: who left her? That evening, while clearing out the tack room, Ethan found something odd, a saddlebag lying half buried under old hay. It wasn't his. The leather was fine, soft, and the initials EM were carved into the strap. He opened it carefully. Inside, he found a handful of oats, a broken pocket watch, and a crumpled envelope. The envelope wasn't sealed. Inside, there was a letter, never sent. The handwriting was the same as the note from the stall. Ethan, if you ever find this, it means I had no other choice. Faith deserves a chance, even if I don't. He froze. His heart skipped. His name. The letter was written to him. He sank onto the hay bales, staring at the words as the truth slowly set in. Someone who knew him. Maybe someone from his past had brought Faith here. But who could it be? He turned the envelope over and noticed something else, a return address smudged with dirt, barely legible, but he could still make out one word: Silver Creek. Silver Creek. It was a small town 2 hours away, a place he hadn't been to in nearly 10 years, not since her. He clenched the paper in his hand. Could it be Emma? The woman he once loved, the one who disappeared after her family's ranch went bankrupt? The one he never stopped thinking about, no matter how many winters passed? Faith shifted her weight, letting out a soft whinny, as if sensing the storm brewing in his chest. Ethan stood up, determination in his eyes. "All right, girl," he murmured. "Looks like we're going for a ride." He saddled his old gelding, checked the map, and tucked both the note and the letter into his coat pocket. Whatever waited for him in Silver Creek, he needed answers. And somehow, deep down, he already knew the truth would hurt. But he had no idea how deep the story really went. The morning Ethan left the ranch was silent, almost too silent. The sky was pale gray, and a thin mist crawled across the fields like a living thing. He saddled his old horse, Duke, and looked back at the barn one last time. Faith stood at the stall door, her dark mane brushing the wood, eyes fixed on him. "I'll come back," he promised softly. "I just need to know who you really belong to." He tucked the letter close to his heart and started down the dirt road leading to Silver Creek. The ride was long and cold, the wind biting through his jacket. Every hoofbeat echoed memories he had tried to bury: Emma's laughter, her long auburn hair blowing in the wind, the promise they once made under the stars: no matter what happens, we'll always find our way back. But that was 10 years ago. Before her father's debt, before the sheriff's auction, before she vanished without a word. Now, the possibility that she had left Faith in his care brought more questions than answers. Why now? Why the secrecy? And what did she mean by "even if I don't" in the letter? As the sun started to set, he reached the outskirts of Silver Creek. The small town looked almost frozen in time, same dusty main street, same wooden saloon sign creaking in the wind, same church bell that hadn't rung in years. But something was different. At the feed store, an old man squinted as Ethan dismounted. "Well, I'll be Ethan Walker, isn't it? Thought you'd left for good." "Just passing through," Ethan replied. "Looking for someone." "Who might that be?" "Emma Matthews." The man's expression darkened. He shifted uneasily. "You didn't hear?" Ethan's stomach dropped. "Hear what?" The old man sighed, his voice trembling. "Emma's been gone near 3 months now. Left her place in the middle of the night. Sheriff found her barn empty, except for her horse." "Faith." Ethan's world seemed to tilt. He gripped the edge of the counter. "You're saying she left her horse behind?" "Yeah," the man nodded. "Strangest thing. Folks said she left a note, too, but the sheriff never showed it around. Ethan's throat went dry. That note. His note. He mounted his horse without another word and headed toward the old Matthews ranch. His pulse was pounding, the cold air stinging his face. When he reached the property, it looked abandoned, the fences falling apart, the windows dark, the air heavy with silence. But near the barn door, half buried under straw, he saw it, a small silver locket, identical to the one Faith had worn. He picked it up, hands trembling. Inside was the same photo, only this time, there was another one behind it. A man. Him. It was then Ethan realized, she hadn't just left the horse to anyone. She had brought Faith home. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway of the abandoned barn, the silver locket trembling in his hands. The photo inside, Emma holding Faith as a foal, and behind it, his own face smiling, felt like a ghost reaching out from the past. The smell of hay and dust mixed with the scent of rain outside, and for a moment, the world seemed to fall silent. He took a step inside. Everything was just as he remembered. The creaky wooden beams, the feeding buckets, the small window where the sunlight used to pour in when Emma would laugh and hum old country songs. Only now, that warmth was gone. In the corner, half covered with hay, he spotted something else, a small wooden box, its lid slightly open. Inside were a few personal belongings, an old photograph, a pressed wildflower, a small notebook bound in worn leather. He flipped it open carefully, the pages fragile and yellowed. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Emma's. If someone finds this, please tell Ethan I never stopped believing in him. I couldn't stay because I was sick, and I didn't want him to see me fade away. Faith was my reason to keep going, but now she needs someone stronger. Someone who can love her the way I did. Someone who can let her run free again. Ethan's hands began to shake. He could almost hear her voice between the lines, soft, trembling, full of love and pain. He turned the page. I wish I could have said goodbye. But maybe this way is better. Maybe he'll forgive me when he sees her eyes, because they carry everything I couldn't say. His vision blurred. He sat down in the straw, holding the notebook against his chest, and for the first time in years, he cried. All the anger, confusion, and loneliness that had haunted him melted into grief, and then, slowly, into peace. The rain started to fall harder, drumming on the roof like a quiet applause from heaven. Ethan looked up, whispering through the tears, "You didn't have to protect me from your pain, Emma. I would have stayed. I would have stayed no matter what." He rode back to his ranch at dawn. The sky was soft pink, the world quiet except for the sound of hooves. When Faith saw him, she let out a low, gentle neigh, the kind that seemed to say welcome home. He opened the stall, ran his hand along her neck, and smiled. "You're not just her horse," he whispered. "You're her goodbye, and her gift." From that day forward, Faith never left his side. Every sunrise, every storm, every quiet night under the stars, she was there, reminding him that love doesn't end when someone's gone. It simply finds a new way to stay. And every time Ethan looked into her eyes, he didn't see loss anymore. He saw Emma. The days that followed felt strange for Ethan. The ranch was quieter than usual, but not empty. Faith's presence filled the silence with something almost sacred. Every morning, she'd wait for him by the gate, as if she'd known him her whole life. Every evening, she'd rest her head on his shoulder when he closed the barn for the night. He found himself talking to her, not just about chores or feed, but about everything he'd never said to Emma. "Do you think she forgave me, girl?" he'd whisper, brushing Faith's mane. "For not finding her sooner? For letting her face it alone?" Faith would nudge him gently, and somehow, that was enough. Weeks passed. The frost began to melt, and the fields turned green again. But Ethan still carried the letter and the notebook wherever he went. He read them under the porch light at night, his thumb tracing the lines she had written. He started to understand, Emma hadn't left him behind. She had found a way back to him, through the only creature she trusted with her heart. One afternoon, as Ethan fixed a broken fence post, a truck pulled up on the dirt road. A woman stepped out. A stranger, maybe in her 40s, with a familiar kindness in her eyes. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Ethan asked cautiously, wiping his hands. "You must be Ethan Walker," she said. "I'm Clara Matthews. Emma's sister." Ethan's chest tightened. He hadn't seen her in over a decade. She looked older, worn by grief, but her smile was gentle. "I heard Faith was here," she said softly. "Emma told me if anything ever happened to her, I should find you. She said you'd understand." Ethan swallowed hard. "I think I do now." They walked to the barn together. When Clara saw Faith, her eyes filled with tears. "Emma raised her since she was a foal. That horse was her everything." "I know," Ethan whispered. "And now she's mine, too." Clara smiled faintly. "Emma left something else for you." She reached into her coat and handed him a small envelope, sealed this time. His name was written on it in the same looping script he'd know anywhere. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means you've found Faith, and me, in a way. Please don't grieve. Promise me you'll let her run, like we used to dream. Let her remind you of the good days, not the ones that broke us. You once said love never dies, it just changes its shape. So here I am, in her, in the land, in the mornings you wake up and still believe in something good. You were my home. Always." Ethan couldn't breathe for a moment. The barn spun softly around him as he pressed the letter against his chest. He didn't say a word, he just turned to Faith, unlatched her stall door, and led her outside. The sun was setting behind the hills, bathing everything in golden light. He took off her halter and whispered, "Go on, girl. She'd want you to run." Faith hesitated, looked back at him once, and then galloped across the open field, her mane catching the last rays of the sun. Ethan stood there for a long time, watching until she disappeared beyond the hill. Then he looked up, smiling through tears. "She's free now, Emma. And maybe, so am I." Days turned into weeks after Faith's gallop into the horizon. Ethan told himself it was right to let her go, that Emma would have wanted her to run free, to live without fences or fear. But every evening, when the sky turned orange and the wind blew through the open fields, he found himself standing by the gate, staring at the distant hills. He'd whisper into the breeze, "You found your freedom, girl. I hope you're safe." The ranch was quiet again. Too quiet. The creak of the barn door, the soft rattle of buckets, the echo of his boots on the wood, they all felt heavier now. The place that once felt full of life seemed to echo Emma's absence more than ever. But he kept his promise. He fixed the fences she'd helped him mend years ago. He planted wildflowers along the path to the barn, the same kind she used to tuck behind her ear. And on the stall door where the note had once hung, he nailed a small wooden sign, "Faith's Stall, Forever Home." Then one morning, long before sunrise, he heard it again, that soft, distant neigh he thought he'd never hear again. Ethan froze. The sound came again, louder this time, from beyond the pasture. He grabbed his coat, stumbled into his boots, and ran toward the gate. The fog was thick, the air damp with dew. And then, through the mist, a shadow appeared, tall, graceful, moving slowly toward him. "Faith," he whispered. She stepped into view, her chestnut coat glistening with morning light. Her mane was tangled, her hooves muddy, but she was unharmed. Around her neck, tied neatly with a red ribbon, hung something small, the locket. Ethan's breath caught. He fell to his knees, wrapping his arms around her neck, the tears coming freely. "You came back," he whispered into her mane. "You found your way home." As he reached for the locket, he noticed it was open, and inside was a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. His hand shook as he took it out. It wasn't old. The ink was fresh. "You kept your promise. That's all I ever needed." The handwriting was Emma's. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the universe finding a way to speak when words shouldn't be possible. Ethan didn't question it. He just smiled through the tears, his heart finally still. Faith nuzzled him gently, then turned her gaze toward the rising sun. He stood beside her, the two of them bathed in gold, the world quiet except for the sound of the wind in the grass. For the first time in years, Ethan felt peace, not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from understanding. Emma was gone. But she was everywhere, in the hills, the sky, the soft breath of the horse she loved. And as Faith lifted her head and whinnied toward the horizon, Ethan whispered, "Yeah, girl. I hear her too." The following weeks passed like a quiet dream. The ranch, once heavy with grief, now felt alive again. Faith's return changed everything, not just for Ethan, but for the land itself. The grass grew greener, the air felt lighter, and every sunrise carried a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Ethan often found himself sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, watching Faith graze near the fence line. Sometimes she'd stop, lift her head, and look toward the hills, the same direction she had run to before. He always wondered if she still heard Emma's voice on the wind, whispering through the valley. One morning, a storm rolled through, fierce and wild. The rain hammered against the barn roof, and thunder rattled the windows. Ethan rushed outside, calling Faith's name. She was out in the open, unbothered by the rain, standing in the very field where she'd first appeared months ago. When he reached her, lightning flashed across the sky, and in that moment, he saw it. Etched faintly into the old barn door, where Emma's note had once been pinned, were new words burned into the wood by time and weather: "Home isn't a place. It's the heart that waits for you." He touched the letters, rain mixing with tears on his cheeks. The words shimmered under the light like something more than coincidence, like a message meant only for him. Faith pressed her head against his shoulder, and he could feel her heartbeat, strong, steady, alive. That night, the storm cleared, leaving the air crisp and clean. The sky unfolded in a sea of stars. Ethan lit a lantern and hung it at the barn door. A tradition Emma used to love, something she called a light for lost souls. The flame flickered gently, casting golden light on Faith's coat. Ethan whispered, "You brought her home, girl. You both did." And as the wind rustled through the valley, he swore he heard a familiar laugh, faint, warm, carried from far beyond the hills. He smiled, closing his eyes. "Good night, Emma." Faith neighed softly, her tail swishing as if in response. Then she turned toward the open pasture, where dawn was already painting the sky with soft hues of rose and gold. Ethan followed her gaze. For the first time in years, he didn't see emptiness out there. He saw promise, a new beginning. He placed his hat over his heart and whispered, "We'll be all right." And as the first light of morning broke over the ranch, it felt as if Emma herself had returned with it, not in body, but in spirit. In every sunrise. In every heartbeat. In every quiet breath of the horse she left behind. Because love, real love, never truly leaves. It simply changes shape. And sometimes, it comes galloping back home.